Welcome to the June 27th, 2024 special meeting of the Minnetonka School Board. I'd like to call it to order. All rise and please say the pledge to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Chris, is there a second?
Second.
Dan? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have an agenda. First up tonight is approval of the collective bargaining agreement. Superintendent Law?
Madam Chair, members of the board, as you know, we are on an every other year basis in negotiations with all of our employee groups. Tonight, the Executive Director of Human Resources and Legal Counsel, Angie Flowers, will be summarizing the mutually agreed upon agreements with 4 collective bargaining groups. Ms. Flowers.
Thank you, Superintendent Law. Good evening, Madam Chair and board members. I'd like to start off by thanking all the district and union teams for all the time, discussion, hard work, and collaboration that they put into reaching tentative agreements with each group. I will begin with a tentative agreement for MISA, that is the district's technology staff. That settlement includes step movement each year with an additional 3% added to the salary schedule each year, and an increase to insurance contributions of $100 in year 1 and $50 in year 2, for a total package of 9.9%. I am asking for your approval of these collective bargaining agreement terms with MISA for 2024-2026.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the collective bargaining agreement for the Minnetonka Information Systems Association?
So moved.
Dan, is there a second?
Second.
Kemery, any questions or discussion? All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. The next tentative agreement is for paraprofessionals. This tentative agreement includes step movement each year and an additional 4% increase to the schedule in year 1 and 3.35% in year 2. Insurance contributions will also be increased by 9% for single employees in year 1, 6% for families in year 1, and 2% for all employees in year 2 for a total package of 9.9%. I am asking for your approval of these collective bargaining agreement terms with paraprofessionals for 2024-2026.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the collective bargaining agreement for the Minnesota School Employees Association employees?
So moved.
Sally, is there a second?
Second.
Chris, any questions or discussion? Dan?
Just for the sake of transparency, I want to note for the record that my spouse is a member of this bargaining unit.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. The tentative agreement for principals includes a newly created pay schedule to address market competitiveness for assistant principals and to make placements more consistent for new hires. The average increase in year 1 is 6.6% due to the increase for assistant principals, and an average increase of 2.4% in year 2 with step movement. Insurance will increase by 10% in year 1 and 5% in year 2. The total package is 9.8%. I am asking for your approval of these collective bargaining agreement terms with the Minnetonka Association of Principals for 2024 through 2026.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the Minnetonka Association of Principals Collective Bargaining Agreement?
So moved.
Kemery, is there a second?
Second.
Chris, any questions or discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. The last tentative agreement is with the district's office assistants. This group will receive step movement in both years and an increase to the schedule of 3% in year 1 and 2.9% in year 2, with a longevity stipend improvement of $250. Insurance contributions will increase by 27% in year 1, as that was the priority for this group. The total package comes to 9.9%. I am asking for your approval of these collective bargaining agreement terms with office assistants for 2024-2026.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the collective bargaining agreement for the Minnetonka School Office Assistants?
So moved.
Sally, is there a second?
Second.
Kemery. Any questions or discussion? We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Flowers.
Thank you.
Next up on our agenda tonight is approval of the fiscal year 25 adopted budget. Superintendent Law?
Madam Chair, members of the board, as we shared earlier in work session, every public school district in the state of Minnesota needs to formally approve and have the board formally approve the budget for the upcoming school year no later than June 30th. The Executive Director of Finance and Operations, Mr. Paul Bourgeois, will be presenting the budget that needs to be approved tonight.
Thank you, Superintendent Law. Madam Chair, members of the board. We reviewed the fiscal year adopted budget for all funds at our study session. Went through them in detail, not quite line by line, but page by page. And so we'll be focusing on the general fund, the general operating fund in this presentation for the public, which is the bulk of our expenditures and the ones that most people are familiar with. Just for the sake of noting it, FY25 is the 9th year of the additional operating funds that were approved by the public with a 72% approval rating back in 2015. And they actually run through fiscal year 26. And then on May 30th, 2024, you were able to extend the current level under new statutory authority that the legislature gave through this past year, able to extend that from fiscal years 27 through fiscal year 36. So that level of funding plus inflation is going to be in place for a total of 20 years through the generosity of the public and then with the extension by the board. This year is the first year in about 18 years that we are making some budget reductions to lower our expenditures because of shortfalls of revenues compared to what we need to keep going with everything that we had in place in fiscal year 24. It's our first round of budget reduction since fiscal year 2007, and the dollar number of $3.3 million back then was about 5% of the total budget. The budget's bigger now, but we did about $3.8 million of budget reductions or adjustments, and that's about 2% of our total budget for fiscal year 25. Our general operating fund gets most of its revenue from per pupil formulas that are set in statute. The biggest one is general education revenue, which is $7,281, which is $143 higher than the prior year. And the operating referendum of $2,209. So we'll hit the dollar figures there. But each one of our K-6 students are bringing in $10,575 from these funding formulas, and each 712 student, because they count as 1.2 funding or adjusted pupil units, which means a funding unit, are bringing in $12,690. So the average is $11,633. Revenues of $167.4 million are budgeted for FY25, which is an increase of $11 million over FY24 amended budget. Expenditures are increasing about $9 million over the FY24 amended budget. The result of $168.9 million, just under $169 million, is that we are at a net deficit of revenues to expenses of about $1.6 million. The important thing to note about that, though, is not all of that is related to ongoing funds. It's really related to, we have the ongoing expenditures covered with the budget adjustments. So we're really just utilizing one-time funds, and utilization of one-time funds is why we have the deficit. And so that's an important point when we talk to our bond rating agency about rating our bonds in the future. Our unassigned fund balance is projected to be 076 million, about 18.1 million, which is 10.7%, which exceeds the amount of 6%, which is the board's policy that's been in place since the late 1980s. The adopted general operating fund revenues, general education revenue of about 90.7 million, operating referendum revenue of about 29.3 million. And then the next biggest chunk of revenue, there's categorical revenues, which includes about $20 million worth of special education revenue. Local optional revenue is $724 per pupil, and that brings in an additional $9 million. On a percentage basis, the general education revenue is 54.2% of all the revenue we bring in. The operating referendum, which we talked about a little while ago, is about 17.5%, so a very important component. Our local optional revenue is 5.4%, and all the categorical programs are 17.8%. We only get about 1.8% of our budget from federal programs. Most school districts in the state get a much higher percentage of their budget from federal revenues. And from an expenditure standpoint, $149 million worth of salaries and benefits. Purchase services of all types are $7.2 million, supplies of $4.4 million, and transportation of $7.5 million. On a percentage basis, we are a people-intensive business, even with all the technology. And so 88.2% of our budget, and that's been consistent for the last couple of 15, 18 years, 88.2% of our budget is salaries and benefits of personnel in the district. And then our purchase services are 4.2%, supplies of 2.6%, and transportation of 4.5%. This is a chart that shows ongoing. It's a summary of a projection that we do, which is a subsequent page, but these numbers are bigger, so they're easy to see. We look at $1.6 million in deficit spending this year, again, mainly related because of some one-time expenditures. But then FY26, we still have work to do, looking at another $5.3 million deficit. FY26 is a funding year. Hopefully the legislature will come through, and we need to continue to petition our legislators to at least give our voters a chance to support us with additional operating referendum revenue. At least give us the chance to ask them, because we've gotten such great support from our community. If we had that chance and we could increase our operating referendum revenue with help from our local community, a lot of these negative numbers would almost disappear or completely disappear for a number of years. So it's just important to note that. So we need some help from our legislators and the legislature. This is just a chart kind of showing everything in total. At the bottom, there's a $18.7 million in the yellow column. That drops down to 7.4% if we would do no budget reductions. The other important thing about budget reductions is if we balance our budget in fiscal 26 and we don't have a $5.3 million deficit, that lowers all the future ones by that same amount. So I use the metaphor, it's like a game of Tetris where the bottom row drops out if you reduce the expenditures to balance. This is just a chart of how our general operating fund unassigned fund balance it has grown over the years, starting after our last time that we reduced the deficit, and when we started doing immersion and some of the other things, and open enrollment started growing. And so we gradually grew the unassigned fund balance up to about $26.5 million. And that sounds like a lot to all of us. It is a lot to all of us individually. But from a district standpoint, that's about 6, maybe 7 weeks of operating expenditures. So you need that for cash flow. And it's also a rainy day fund, and we did have a rainy day in fact, we had, it wasn't just a rainy day, it was a monsoon with COVID-19, right? So we used some COVID-19 dollars and started drawing down from that peak of $26.5 million. We balanced the budget in fiscal year 23. Then we're deficit spending in FY24 and FY25 projected. So for the last 5 years, we're showing deficits for our operating fund. And so if we're going to hang on to our AAA bond rating, which we gained first in April 2010, we really need to balance, but we also need to balance to provide stability to the district. Here's just a breakdown of our general education revenue. 57.9% $1 million of that is generated by resident pupils, and $33.9 million is generated by open enrolled pupils. So open enrolled pupils actually generate enough dollars from those funding formulas to cover all their incremental costs. Resident pupils have to cover all the costs of operating the district as if there were no open enrolled students. And we have calculations showing that the open enrolled pupils year after year cover their incremental costs, and then that allows any additional dollars over their additional incremental costs that to be available for use of all students. So it increases the money available for general education opportunities, general instruction opportunities for our resident students by 23 to 25% every year. So they are a huge contribution to the success of all of our students with the dollars that they bring. In our categorical revenue, the biggest one is special education. We have a variety of other QComp, which is a teacher quality program, which is to develop higher improvements and help staff develop higher acumen for teaching. About $2.9 million of additional dollars for that, and various other programs are in. There's about 15 other various programs, several of which are listed, another 10 that are in the summary. Investment income is budgeted at about $2.5 million. We have higher interest rates. We try to make our cash in the bank work very hard for us. That's bonus income, so interest rates have been higher. We've got income locked in for the full year for the majority of our estimate of investment earnings. So if interest rates start to decline over the next 12 months, we still get the investment income at over 5% locked in. So we can count on that in our budget and use that to help pay for things. Our voter-approved operating referendum, again, $29.3 million, and we had an increase of $91.92. $91.92. It's about 2 times the normal rate of increase because there's still some inflation adjustments from prior years, but not as large as previously gotten in a few other years. Local optional revenue is $724 per pupil, and it's been frozen since July 1st of 2014. Adjusted for inflation, it'd be $920. We worked really hard with our other school districts, our AMSD, our organization, our School Business Officials Organization, Rural Education Association Organization, Metropolitan School Districts, to try to get this change and increase for inflation. Last year we got some hearings, we came close, but we didn't get into the final bill. Hopefully that'll change, because if we could get that adjusted for inflation, that would help us to the tune of about $2.5 million per year. The other important thing is Minnetonka ranks out of 329 school districts in the state. Minnetonka, in terms of general funds, state aid, money from the state to help support our school, we rank 299th out of 329. We are in the bottom 10%. And that's not just a 1 year, that's a decades-long pattern. We are always in the bottom 10% in terms of how much money we get funded with from the state of Minnesota. But fortunately, our generous taxpayers help to make that up. So if you include operating referendum, then we're at 155 out of 329 school districts. So we're just above the median. We're really the middle of the pack in terms of revenue. And again, that's thanks to our local voters. And the important thing about that too is the conventional wisdom. In fact, even mentioned in the Star Tribune article, Minnetonka was mentioned as a wealthy district this past weekend. No, we are actually in the middle of the pack in terms of revenue. And the important thing about that is school districts pretty much fund about 100% of their revenue, maybe 99, maybe 101%, but about 100% of their revenue every year. So if we're 155th in operating referendum or in total revenue, we're about 155th in expenditures. So we are not rocketing to the top in terms of how much we have to spend on pupils. There are at least 154 more districts in the state that spend more dollars than we do. So it's just important to note that, because the conventional wisdom often is wrong. General operating fund salaries and benefits, again, a little breakdown, 88.2%. So you've seen those numbers. Some breakdowns of purchase services, about $1.8 million in utilities. It's really important to note that we are the anchor tenants in 6 utility-scale community solar gardens, and we also have a Renewable Connect contract with the with Xcel Energy, and those contracts have actually given us about $460,000 in credits in fiscal year 23. We don't have fiscal year 24 yet, but so we've invested in those renewable energy resources in terms of signing up and anchoring and making the construction of those solar gardens possible. Actually, you have to have an anchor tenant, just like an anchor tenant in a mall, right? And so we've been able to actually reduce our utilities by 460 to the year before that it was 530,000. So depending on the year and how much sun we get and all that kind of stuff, we get some pretty significant credits. Maintenance repairs, 520,000 for ongoing repairs. Of course, we have a long-term maintenance fund to keep our buildings in the state of good repair for the long term, but we don't really spend that much in these other areas. The special education tuition and care and treatment of 654,000 for students who need to go to get some services that we can't provide in the district. Supplies, anything related to instruction is about 2.4 million. Our maintenance supplies are 171,000. That's all the paper supplies primarily, and cleaning supplies and those types of things. And then also, for whatever reason, natural gas is considered a supply in our accounting rules. So we spend about $540,000 on natural gas. But we've done a lot of efficiencies over the years to actually keep that low also. And transportation, we run in the neighborhood of 50 K-12 regular transportation bus routes, and in the neighborhood in any given year of 23 special education bus routes. So that's what we have budgeted. So that's it for the general fund. Our other funds, nutrition services, community education, operating capital, technology, they all get specific dollars for specific uses, and all those are balanced revenues to expenditures or with surpluses and are very stable. They're also a much smaller part of our district compared to the general operating fund. And so when you hear school districts across the state saying, hey, we're having to cut our budget, they're always referring to the general operating fund, which is also their biggest one. But with that, that's a summary of where we're at. So we are having to adopt a deficit budget this year after having made about $3.8 million in budget reductions or some cost shifts where we could code different, utilize different accounting and code to one of the other funds where we qualify under the accounting rules. So hopefully we will be able to get some success at the legislature and have that be not an annual exercise, and hopefully we'll be able to start another streak here in another year or two. If we need to get our legislators on board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bourgeois. Can I have a motion to approve the fiscal year 25 adopted budget?
So moved.
Dan, is there a second?
Second.
Chris? Any questions or discussion or comments? Dan?
Want to make 2 or 3 points here. First is just Paul, David, Jackie, everybody, thank you so much for working through this process and all the work you've done to wrestle this budget into place. I know things didn't go the way we wanted them to at the legislature, and this has been a tough process, and I appreciate all the work that you folks and your departments have put in to get us to where we are, to communicate what's going on to the community, and to always keep us up here apprised of what's happening and looking toward the future. So we really, really appreciate that. For folks who aren't here, and if you want to download the board packet, you can take a look at pages 118 to 121. It's a big packet, but you'll see all of the cuts and adjustments and things that have gone into balancing the budget this year. And that's a really informative piece of the board packet to look at if you want to figure out what the real world impact of these changes are. And I just want to point out that not all of these numbers are negative. Not all of these numbers are cuts. If you look through here, we are still investing in areas that are important to invest in and hiring in departments that need personnel. So our district is staying on top of and making the hires necessary to keep up our tradition of excellence here. And the final point I want to make is, and you alluded to it more than once, is that we're in an election this year. And there aren't any school board positions on the ballot this year, but if you have your state representative or your state senator or your congressperson or your senator reach out to them, talk to them, let them know how important public education is to you and how important it is to increase funding for public education, because they hear from us over and over and over, and the most important thing that they can hear from is their constituents and their parents emphasizing how important funding public education is. So please do that outreach and help us get this budget back on track. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I would just also kind of emphasize that we really appreciate the strategic shifting and thoughtful changes that have been made, because while we're still in a deficit for next year, it could have been much more significant. And so I think I'm thankful that we're in the position we're in, and hopefully we can figure out a good strategy going forward. So thank you. We have a motion and a second. So all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We have a budget. Thank you. Next up on our agenda is authorization of sale of bonds. Superintendent Law?
Madam Chair, members of the board, on an annual basis, school districts approve a long-term facilities budget. Tonight, we'll hear a presentation about approval for bonds that we'll be selling to fund next summer's projects, along with other funding streams that are either refinances or funding projects that are district priorities. Executive Director of Finance and Operations, Mr. Paul Bourgeois, will be summarizing each of these separately for a chance for you to vote on them. Mr. Bourgeois.
Thank you, Superintendent Law. Madam Chair, members of the board, you approved our 10-year long-term facility maintenance plan back in March, and thank you for that. Again, trying to keep our approximately 1.8 million square feet and 260 acres of facilities in a state of good repair for the long term to keep paying it forward. We are asking you for authorization, the official authorization that we need for the bond resolution to issue $14,285,000 par value of bonds. These dollars will be used to do the engineering and architect work that's necessary to get the summer maintenance projects for summer 25 ready to go. And we'll get those out to bid. Actually, we're going to start working on them in July and August, and we're hoping to have everything bid out by the October, maybe a few might straggle in November, but get out there early because the early bird gets the good deal, and try to stretch these dollars as far as possible. But then the work will be done, of course, in June, July, August of 2025. But that allows us to actually work with the low bidder to plan, make sure they get their materials ready and staged and ready to go, so that when we have the 8 or 10 weeks between when school's out and when everybody starts coming back, we can get everything done that we need to get done. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the sale of 2024B long-term facilities maintenance bonds?
So moved.
Kemery, is there a second?
Second.
Chris, any questions or discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. On the 2024D general obligation refunding bonds, one of the things that we've always done over the years is look at our portfolio of bonds outstanding and try to readjust them. In some respects, it's almost like saying when you have an opportunity to refinance your house, very similar to that. So we can look at refinancing for a lower rate or restructure and have a lower rate plus smaller payments or reduce par value, all those options. And we've done a lot of that. We've done 48 of these restructuring activities over the last 15 years. And actually, one year, a few years back, Member Battaglia will remember that we actually had 14 refunding transactions because we knew interest rates were going up, and we refunded 18 bonds at 14 transactions to lock in low rates. So we haven't had as many refunding transactions lately because of that, but we keep monitoring, and we do have some other bond. Hopefully, they're in the green zone, so to speak, that we're really getting close. But we have two that are actually in a position where it makes sense to strike. And we have 2024D general obligation bonds. These bonds would have would refund the 2018 E bonds that have an average interest rates of 4.28%. We're expecting to replace them with, what do I have it on here? Down to 3.92%, and we're also going to lower the outstanding par value because of the structure of the new bond by $250,000. So we're hoping that actually interest rates even trickle down a little bit. We have a little bit of a factor in here, even estimating higher than what the current market rates are. So we're hoping the market rates stay where they are because we might actually be able to sell even at a little bit lower rate than that. But we're asking for permission to refund these bonds and save the taxpayers some money.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the sale of 2024 D general obligation refunding bonds?
So moved.
Sally, is there a second?
Second.
Dan, any questions or comments? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Last one.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So we're asking you to refund the sale of our 2024 certificates of participations, which were refunding bonds from bonds that were issued back in 2009 and 2011. So we're getting, in essence, a second bite at the apple to get more savings. And this transaction will actually take our refunding transaction cumulatively up to 50 with a savings amount of over basically about 26.2 million. We were at 48 and 25.6, and so this will get us to 50 and 26.2 over the years cumulatively. So, but these would allow us to reduce principal by 350,000 and take the interest rates down from 4.97% to an estimated 4.16.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the sale of 2024 E certificates of participation refunding bonds?
So moved.
Chris, is there a second?
Second.
Kemery, any questions or comments? I would just comment, thank you, because again, this is just a little example of small ways to save the district money in the long term. These percentages don't seem like a lot, but they add up really quickly. So thank you for your work on this. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Bourgeois. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Chris, is there a second?
Second.
Dan, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Kemery, is there a second?
Second.
Sally, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.